stepping in
spectacular,
as well.
over the top. I mean, that was a full force shot to the temple. I mean, he's right now. So they wipe off his gloves, but you look at him like he's really feeling it right now. I mean, he probably has no idea where he is.
Time when I'm going to take your soul and you're either going to give up or you're going to get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct, you just will never be a good fighter.
It's likely that one big shot's going to land if the guy's not throwing other shots. So I thought with less artillery in the air, less bombs in the air, that the guy would have a chance to get to later rounds.
Okay, so picture this scene. Joe Rogan is watching alongside Anthony Joshua when Jake Paul gets completely destroyed, and Rogan just starts cracking up. You really can't fault the guy, because if you're looking at this from Rogan's angle, this whole thing was basically over before it started. Rogan lays it out in that straight-talking way he does, pointing out how Jake's entire boxing journey has followed one playbook. The dude consistently picks opponents who are either way beyond their best years or MMA fighters who don't actually box for a living. That's been his comfort zone this whole time. But now we're talking about something totally different. This isn't some washed-up fighter or grappler trying to throw hands. This is Anthony Joshua, an actual Olympic gold medalist heavyweight who's been competing against killers his entire career. Rogan really hammers this home because it explains everything about how this went down. Joshua isn't just good, he's existing in a completely separate universe of skill level. And here's the kicker. Joshua is naturally fighting at a weight that's way heavier than where Jake belongs. When Rogan breaks down the boxing fundamentals, he makes it painfully obvious that anyone paying attention saw this coming from orbit. The fight results just proved what serious boxing people knew was going to happen. This wasn't shocking, it was inevitable.
Well, realistically, it's one of the craziest propositions of all time. You take a guy who just had a boxing match that looks like a sparring match with a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, and then you're going to fight one of the absolute scariest knockout artists.
Now this part gets really wild, because we need to talk about the heavyweight scene after this beatdown happens. Anthony Joshua drops this statement afterward that seems almost kind at first glance, but when you really think about what he's saying, it's actually pretty terrifying. Joshua basically says the knockout he landed actually rescued Jake Paul from something worse. Let that sit with you for a minute. He's not just talking about winning the fight, he's explaining that if things had kept going, if the ref hadn't jumped in exactly when he did, Joshua was about to completely destroy Jake Paul on every level imaginable. We're talking complete mental and physical breakdown here. Joshua is basically suggesting that getting knocked unconscious was actually the gentle outcome compared to what would have happened if Jake had to survive more rounds of that beating. It's like he's saying the knockout was mercy compared to the systematic dismantling he was planning to deliver. That's a pretty bone-chilling thing to hear when you consider how much control he felt he had in that ring.
Fighting's not just physical, it's psychological. And when you understand the psychological warfare, I did say to you is that, Jake, what's going to happen? I'm going to see a time when I'm going to take your soul and you're either going to give up or you're going to get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct...
When Anthony Joshua gets connected to this whole circus situation with Jake Paul, the boxing community immediately splits right down the middle, and people get really heated about it. You've got passionate arguments happening on both sides. A lot of serious observers look at this matchup as straight entertainment rather than any kind of real athletic competition. And honestly, the facts back them up. Physical differences between these guys are impossible to miss. The gap in real experience is enormous. And their backgrounds, we might as well be comparing astronauts to accountants. Anthony Joshua has held heavyweight titles twice, collected multiple championship belts, and earned Olympic gold before he even started getting paid to fight. Meanwhile, Jake Paul, let's keep it real, is still figuring out basic boxing fundamentals. Getting better? Absolutely, but he's nowhere close to championship territory. This whole thing feels more like a manufactured entertainment product designed specifically to break pay-per-view records than any kind of legitimate sporting contest where both guys actually have a shot. That's exactly why people immediately started calling it a sideshow instead of a real fight worth respecting. Simon Jordan, who never holds anything back, goes absolutely ballistic after Anthony Joshua destroys Jake Paul's jaw with that knockout. He calls the entire situation poison for boxing's reputation. And he's not diplomatic about it.
The boxing industry, because straight after the fight, I heard the question being posed to Joshua, will he now fight Fury? And then my first thought was, after what I've seen, who cares? After that, who cares if Joshua fights Fury? I like Anthony Joshua immensely, Spencer. Any exchanges I've had with him, I think he comes across terrifically well. But I fail to see where it's taken us, where it's taken him, other than hugely increasing his bank balance. You know, I really fail to see what this has done.
Well, it's done nothing, but he was going to fight in November, like I said, and he's just gone in there against Jake Paul. What has it done for his legacy? Absolutely zero. But it was, you know, he's earned a lot of money doing that. And he's going to go again, and he's going to fight possibly February, March, and then there's that Tyson Fury fight that's looming that could happen in September, whether Tyson Fury decides to come out of retirement or not come out of retirement. For Anthony Joshua, he's earned a hell of a lot of money. This is prize fighting, and that's what it's all about. And that's what he's done, and he's built a new audience.
Simon Jordan takes his criticism even further, and his points actually make a lot of sense when you consider what's happening to professional boxing overall. He argues that these kinds of fights completely muddy the waters between real sport and pure showbiz, which becomes a serious problem because once that distinction gets lost, there's no putting it back. These spectacle fights steal attention, media coverage, and serious money away from legitimate competition between actual ranked contenders who've worked their way up properly. Jordan really drives home the point that Anthony Joshua has already made generational money through his real boxing career. The guy has locked in his legacy. His spot in boxing history is guaranteed. So in Jordan's view, Joshua absolutely doesn't need these novelty matchups to boost his reputation or fill his bank account. And here's something fascinating that Jordan brings up. Even if that massive Tyson Fury fight that everyone's been waiting for never actually materializes for whatever reason, Joshua's financial situation is so secure that retiring completely wouldn't shock anyone. The man doesn't have to keep fighting, especially not in these types of situations. When Jordan discusses Jake Paul in this whole context, you can really hear how frustrated he is about boxing's current direction.
Earning more than Joshua. That apart, Spencer, 6 rounds to get Paul out of there. Reputationally, how does it leave AJ?
Well, thankfully, it didn't go to points because I think that would have been a disaster for Anthony Joshua. I think that he needed to get the job done inside the distance, you know, and he done it. Look, he could have done it at any given point. I think that he could have cut the ring off whenever he wanted to and got Jake Paul out of there. He took his time on that. He allowed Jake Paul to run around like a rabbit and throw the occasional shot from time to time. And I think he only landed one clean punch, didn't he, Anthony Joshua? And that was the one that broke his jaw in 2 places.
But, I mean, you said, did you not, to us in this very studio the other day, he's got to get him out of there in round 1.
I did.
Otherwise, what are we seeing?
Exactly that. You know, and I think what we saw there was a little bit of entertainment. And that was pretty much it, but not entertainment that many people enjoyed, if I'm honest. I think that people wanted to see a demolition job. We didn't.
Check this out. Joe Rogan completely switches his tone to shower Anthony Joshua with serious praise. And he really dissects what makes Joshua such a terrifying opponent from a pure skill perspective. Rogan talks about Joshua's speed first, which is absolutely insane for someone carrying that much muscle mass. Then you've got the athletic ability, which is just unfair for a heavyweight division fighter. And obviously, you can't discuss Joshua without mentioning that nuclear bomb punch that can shut your lights off instantly. Rogan explains how Joshua moves like he should probably weigh 40 pounds less than he actually does. That mix of size, quickness, and knockout power is just broken. Seriously, he's walking around with this instant fight-ending ability that completely changes the psychology of every exchange. Because opponents understand that one slip-up, one dropped hand, and they're waking up confused on the mat. Rogan calls Joshua an absolute nightmare for anybody, but particularly for crossover athletes coming from different combat backgrounds or entertainment worlds. He talks about how Joshua can eat up distance so fast you barely register what's happening, and once he's within punching range, those exchanges can finish with you counting ceiling light. In Rogan's analysis, these physical and technical advantages make it completely unrealistic for crossover fighters to hang with Joshua at any meaningful level. It's just not an even playing field from a raw ability standpoint. Rogan points out that Joshua is genuinely skilled as a boxer with polished fundamentals. This is a massive, Olympic champion heavyweight, Anthony Joshua. The element that really sets Joshua apart, The factor that keeps Rogan fascinated is that rare combination of gifts that almost never come together in one fighter. He's carrying that one-shot nuclear option where literally one clean connection can end absolutely everything. In the terrifying aspect, he's quick enough to deliver that shot before you realize it's coming. Adam Booth, who's a well-respected trainer and boxing analyst, offers this brutally realistic assessment after studying the fight, and he actually gives Jake Paul some genuine credit, which caught people off guard. Booth observes that Jake Paul did succeed in making Anthony Joshua miss punches at specific points during their fight, and Booth considers this legitimately impressive from a technical angle. He explains that Jake's positioning and movement demonstrated real growth and focus, actually forcing Joshua to recalibrate his timing rather than just connecting freely whenever he chose to. While Booth makes it crystal clear that this doesn't mean Jake was controlling the fight, or even truly competitive throughout, he does recognize that creating uncertainty in an elite heavyweight like Joshua is genuinely noteworthy. It demonstrates advancement in Jake's boxing education even though the final result was never really in doubt. Building on his breakdown, Adam Booth explores deeper into why those sequences matter from a boxing development standpoint. He explains that forcing a fighter of Joshua's quality to miss shots doesn't happen by accident. It requires solid game planning, precise timing, and real composure to pull off under that kind of intense pressure. Booth says, Jake's movement in those exchanges and his ability to stay calm when there's a legitimate knockout machine trying to separate you from consciousness deserves actual recognition. However, and this part is crucial, Booth also emphasizes repeatedly that these brief, successful moments don't alter the fundamental reality of what transpired in that ring. Joshua's superior class, his devastating power, and his years of elite competition still completely controlled the outcome once he found his rhythm and started connecting with clean punches.
Joshua and Jake Paul shared a ring. Your takeaways from the 6 rounds that we saw, presuming you watched?
I was impressed with Jake Paul. I thought that, following on from what we're saying, right? A few years ago, he was on Disney as a kid, acting up, and has decided to become a professional fighter. That takes balls, but he's obviously striving to be as good as he can be. You can see that in the way that he moves, the way that he is developed in how he's punching and performing. But to make a 2-time world heavyweight champion that's still live, AJ's still got something about him, to make him miss in such an accomplished manner. All right, so at times he was jumping out and running around, but there were times when he was well in range and still making AJ unable to land a clean, solid shot. He deserves a lot of respect for that. And then the shot that actually finished the fight, that broke his jaw quite badly, didn't put him out. That shot's that shot he threw with serious intention has put a lot of professional heavyweights to sleep. He didn't go to sleep. He actually finished on his knees, didn't he? Laughing and spitting blood out of his mouth. So, like they say, it's a special type of crazy and a special type of brave to do it. But I actually, hats off to him, because he showed that he's developing some accomplished little skills in there to look after himself. The size difference is always going to fatigue him.
I know everyone will come with the idea that, AJ should just go in there 1 round and smash him to bits, and that should be it was a big ring, right? Perhaps he could have cut the ring off a bit better, but would I be right in saying that regardless of skill level, if you forget about that with the 2 for a second, if someone is on the back foot on their bike and doing what Jake was doing, it's difficult no matter who you are, no matter the kind of separation in skill level.
It's a big ring, and you've either got to run at him and look like a novice yourself, or just take your...
After this knockout goes down, the focus moves in a pretty wild direction. And suddenly, we're hearing about Logan Paul supposedly trying to intimidate Anthony Joshua and making public statements about getting payback for his little brother. Logan reportedly shows serious interest in fighting Joshua himself, which immediately gets boxing people talking. But here's the reality. They're not taking it even remotely seriously. Actually, they're shooting down the idea even quicker than they dismissed the Jake fight. Analysts instantly highlight that a Logan versus Joshua fight would be way more lopsided than what we just witnessed with Jake. And their logic is pretty sound when you examine it closely. They emphasize that Jake, whatever criticism you want to throw at him, dedicates himself full-time to boxing training with legitimate professional coaches. He's committed to improving, he's grinding daily, he's studying the fundamentals. Logan, by contrast, doesn't have that same level of dedication and technical development. He's dabbled in boxing, sure, but not with the same seriousness or consistency. A Logan versus Joshua fight would be even more brutally one-sided, if that's even possible to imagine. The broader conversation around this potential bout confirms that Logan Paul's pursuit of Anthony Joshua would move beyond simple spectacle into what analysts are calling complete mockery. And that's harsh language, but they're choosing it intentionally. They argue that even Jake, despite getting dominated, demonstrated in moments that he belongs in professional boxing, at least on a fundamental level. You could witness the training, the preparation, the grasp of base. Logan, in comparison, is viewed as much less refined and much less committed to boxing as an actual craft versus a profit-generating opportunity. The agreement among boxing professionals is absolutely clear. Such a fight would provide zero competitive value, nothing that progresses the sport or challenges either participant in any substantial way, and would only amplify the criticism that's already mounting about boxing's trajectory and where the sport is going with these celebrity crossover situations.
Paul would be more of a mismatch than Jake Paul. You know what I mean? Because at least Jake Paul has taken boxing or has trained with real boxing trainers and real boxers. Whereas Logan Paul, you know, he did that exhibition with Floyd, and Floyd's a little guy. Not saying a little guy can't thump, because Floyd really gave him some two pieces with no sides, right? But at the same time, you take his friend, Floyd's friend, Anthony Joshua, and get hit by him and see what happens. The same thing. Probably worse, because I think Logan, you know, he's a little taller than Jake. And because he's a little taller than Jake, he may think he's a little stronger than Jake, which I don't know which one's true or not. I don't think it makes a difference. But because he may feel that way, he may want to go in there and try to bang it out with AJ. And if that happens, it's going to be a lot quicker. See, that 6 rounds it took AJ to finally catch Jake. It took that way because Jake was on that bicycle, moving, being elusive, trying to come in and then come out. He tried to do a very poor man's Alexander Usyk, right? And it didn't work for him. Logan ain't going to do that. Logan's going to come in throwing punches and bunches like he did with Floyd, trying to get him in there and, you know, do all this stuff. And what's going to happen as soon as AJ lines him up, sets his punch, he's going to hit Jake, and he's going to break Jake down, and he may break his jaw.
Sean O'Malley, who comes from the MMA side and gets combat sports from a competitor's viewpoint, analyzes the fight aftermath by really examining Jake Paul's psychology and mental preparation heading into this match. And his perspective is actually pretty fascinating, because it's more understanding than what most boxing experts are offering. He says that all the big talk and public confidence that Jake displayed before the fight were completely misread by critics who just dismissed it as marketing or fantasy. In O'Malley's view, Jake absolutely needed that internal confidence, that swagger, that public demonstration of self-belief to psychologically prepare himself to actually enter a ring with someone who's not just talented, but a dual Olympic champion performing at the absolute top of the sport. O'Malley explains from his own competitive experience that confidence and mental strength are absolutely critical when you're facing impossible odds, even if reality proves otherwise and the outcome goes badly in the end. It's about getting your mind to a space where you can actually compete, where you're not frozen by terror or the sheer scale of the challenge. O'Malley continues that, without that psychological armor, without convincing yourself that you deserve to be in there and can actually win, Jake wouldn't have been capable of performing whatsoever under that kind of crushing pressure. He thinks the criticism from people who've never competed at that level completely misses how incredibly difficult it is to even step into a ring with someone of Joshua's stature. While the defeat was clear-cut, and there's no questioning the final result, O'Malley argues that Jake's mental approach demonstrated respect for the challenge in his own manner, and showed the enormous psychological requirements of facing an elite heavyweight who can literally turn off your brain with a single punch.
Got in the ring.
Jake was shooting double legs, too.
Shooting double legs, nice
Duck
ones,
unders.
with ankle picks, duck unders. But dude, God, people are, I see so much people talking shit on the fight, which, dude, what the fuck did they expect? Like, Jake was hyping himself up, saying he's gonna win. Dude, that's self-belief. He needed that to go in. He needed that to get himself into the ring. You know what I'm saying? He
Yeah.
just needed that.
What do you think about the sticking the tongue out?
Dude, he's a showman. This is a fucking YouTuber that switched to pro boxing.
Yep.
And he's fighting Anthony fucking Joshua.
He's
He made
entertaining.
$90 million. $7.5 million per minute. Nate Diaz says that boy don't work hard enough. This girl in the UFC said, Jake Paul shot more double legs in boxing in a match than I did in my UFC career. Ryan Garcia said, he's a runner, he's a track star. Al Germain said, this is a clown show. Josh Hammond said, dude, it's like, what did they expect? They expect him to go in there and look like a clean fucking Floyd versus Manny Pacquiao. Two of the, you know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck?
You see the aftermath, like his jaw and everything. Fuck.
Jake Paul's broken jaw. Jake has to get wired shut for 7 days or something like that.
Yeah, like
Tim
titanium
had to do
plates.
7 weeks.
Yeah, Tim says that was the worst thing he's ever gone through.
7 weeks. Tim broke his jaw in Montana. Tried to go to the hospital. Hospital said the surgeon's out of town. So now he has to. So he's fucking goes like a week without even getting surgery. At least Jake was able to probably get it like next day, that same day. But it's like all the people hating on Jake. It's crazy. Connor said Jake is stupid and will be altered permanently from this bout. I look at it. It's inspiring seeing what he does because I know how much like he's putting in work. He's doing legitimate fight camps.
He's sparring constantly. He's doing rounds. He's eating properly. He's handling everything, and he's promoting the fight. Teddy Atlas, who's among the most credible voices in boxing with decades of wisdom, clarifies that his prediction about the fight, possibly lasting multiple rounds, was built on genuine boxing considerations and real concerns, not any kind of conspiracy thinking about the fight being scripted or fake. And Atlas explains his logic thoroughly, because he wants everyone to understand his reasoning. He points to Anthony Joshua's extended time away from competition, which always creates questions for any boxer, regardless of their talent level. Then there's the knockout defeat Joshua experienced in his last fight, and the mental uncertainty and hesitation that naturally comes after that kind of devastating loss. Atlas says those demons, those psychological wounds, require genuine time to heal from a fighter's psyche, especially for a fighter like Joshua, who's not typically an aggressive starter in his fights. He usually studies opponents early. Atlas also discusses the expanded ring dimensions that were utilized for this fight, which provided Jake Paul considerably more space to move around and survive those opening rounds if he could maintain mobility. All of these elements were valid factors in Atlas's analysis. He thinks Jake had a legitimate, carefully planned strategy that emphasized heavily on movement and conditioning, attempting to make Joshua chase and tire him out. But once the intensity escalated and Joshua began cutting off the ring effectively, the oxygen became scarce for Jake, as Atlas describes it. In Atlas's view, Jake hit a level of pressure he had never faced before, both psychologically and physically. The mix of Joshua's constant pressure moving forward, Jake's muscular frame, which creates quicker exhaustion because muscle needs more oxygen than other body tissue, and the pure intensity of competing against championship-level opposition, all resulted in Jake struggling for breath and declining. Atlas absolutely states, and he wants this to be perfectly clear, that the fight was completely real, authentic, and determined by actual boxing factors, not any kind of fixed result.
I thought it was going to go rounds. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a silent agreement. I wasn't sure there was going to be a sparring match agreement that will spar for a while. I wasn't sure. I was honest about it. That's why I said it's going to go rounds. I wasn't sure if there was an understanding that, we'll play a little bit and then we'll get a little more and, whatever. So that was part of it. But there was real parts. Say, that's the fixed part. That's the WWE part. That's where the people, and I'm with you. I get it if you want to think that. Here's why I picked rounds, and this is what I think I saw, and I know that in my mind I saw, was the fact is that a lot of people didn't think about. 15 months off. And there was going to be some ruts. There was going to be some hesitation. There was going to be some time. He got knocked out by Dubois. Freaking 15 months ago. They were going to be ghosts in the attic. I don't care who you're fighting. You get in the ring again. It's going to take a minute to exercise those ghosts. The rust. You want to call it rust, whatever. It's going to take 5-6 rounds to get rid of the rust. But it's going to, the doubt, the self-doubt, the being in the ring for the first time with nothing in between after being knocked out. That was going to be a play. And then the size of the ring, 22 by 20. It's usually 20 to 20 is pretty usually around average. And it's 22 by 20. More room to elude, more room to move around, right? I thought maybe go in there with track shoes. He didn't go with track shoes.
Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi, both former world champions who understand boxing completely, delivered this tough but incredibly straightforward analysis of the fight that examines how terribly things concluded for Jake Paul. Beyond just losing the actual contest, they highlight that Jake sustained serious, genuine injuries in there, including a jaw that got fractured in multiple places and several teeth that were knocked out during the beating he absorbed. Yet despite taking that level of physical punishment, Jake still couldn't earn respect from the serious boxing audience, which is probably what he wanted most of all. In Chris's opinion, the fans weren't impressed or entertained, because from their angle, Jake never really attempted to fight back. He spent the majority of the fight backing up, circling, staying away from exchanges. Chris thinks, and he's really firm about this, that Jake would have been much better off attacking aggressively from the first bell, genuinely attempting to win, even if that meant getting finished earlier in the bout. At least then he would have displayed courage and warrior spirit. Chris references the Francis Ngannou fight against Tyson Fury, explaining that fighters gain respect from boxing audiences when they actually try to win, when they take chances, and demonstrate bravery. Paulie builds on this breakdown by explaining from a technical angle why Jake's running style was never going to work, even if he believed it was his smartest approach. He says that moving continuously around the ring exhausts your legs much quicker than most people understand. And all it accomplishes is postponing the unavoidable when you're facing someone with Joshua's strength and ability. Especially in a large ring, where you have more ground to cover, that endless movement becomes draining. Paulie adds a key point that Jake simply doesn't possess the boxing fundamentals yet to move and fight effectively simultaneously. That's an expert skill that requires years to master. As Paulie explains, a fighter can either decide to engage hard and hold their position, or they can retreat and survive, but they can't combine both approaches successfully because they lack the technical base yet. Jake chose survival and defensive movement, and both analysts totally agree that this decision ultimately damaged his reputation with boxing fans much more than an early knockout would have. The refusal to try winning is what destroyed his credibility.
Yeah, an Ngannou type fight. Yeah, Ngannou, he's got balls. Ngannou's got balls, man. He went out there and he tried to fight, tried to win. Jake Paul didn't try to win at any point during the fight. He was just trying to survive. I think that's actually ultimately going to hurt him with boxing fans.
What do you think, Paulie? I mean, you talked about the in and out kind of style, kind of hits and runs, and you said that it runs out your legs. He was exhausted a couple rounds into the fight, and B, it only saved him for so long.
He doesn't have the boxing skills to box on the move anyway. Once I saw the big ring, I knew he was going to run for his life. When you're that much of a novice, which obviously it's not even an insult to him, it's just lack of experience. But when you're that much of a novice, you either know how to run for your life or fight all out. You don't have that in between yet. You haven't developed enough of that in between boxing acumen to really pull that off. And so what ends up happening? You're either going to fight your ass off and you'll last a minute. Chris, you're being generous. Round 2, he would have got knocked out in round 1 if he would have fought. But at least he would have fought. He would have got the respect of the people and more importantly, the boxing community instead of these clowns that follow him and are still defending him. Now what happens is you didn't get any respect as a fighter. You didn't get any respect as a fighter because you didn't try to fight at all. If he would have, I was watching that through 2-3 rounds. I'm thinking to myself, this guy would do this for 8 rounds if he can. If he can do this for 8 rounds, absolutely not fight at all, absolutely not engage a single time in 8 rounds, he will actually do this. And he'll do it shamelessly. And that's the problem. That's the problem. The shamelessness of his approach to the fight. You're going to be a fighter. Then don't make an ass out of the whole sport, out of the whole business, and out of yourself first and foremost. Because in the end, what happens? You got his jaw broke anyway. So what ends up happening? What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get hurt? You're going to get knocked out? You got hurt and you got knocked out anyway. But you just prolonged the inevitable, and you got no respect out of it now. Because nobody's respecting that kind of performance. Nobody's respecting a performance where you would totally content to steal money from everyone by running for your life for 8 rounds.
When everything is said and done, stepping back to view this entire spectacle from beginning to end, this result felt completely unavoidable, like watching a train wreck develop that everyone could see coming from miles away. It was a total mismatch on every measurable criteria, and it unfolded exactly the same way when they actually got in there and competed. Anthony Joshua's enormous size edge, his championship-level speed that shouldn't exist at heavyweight, and that devastating knockout power all proved totally decisive, precisely as everyone predicted. At the same time, and this deserves recognition, Jake Paul displayed real moments of boxing improvement, genuine courage and durability to even be in there absorbing those shots, and the type of defensive movement and ring intelligence that indicates he's actually studying the sport and treating it seriously, even though he's not ready to close the absolutely enormous gap to an elite, Olympic-caliber heavyweight. The aftermath from this fight showcases two conflicting narratives that are essentially battling each other in modern boxing. You've got the critics who see these crossover fights as sideshow entertainment that are genuinely hurting boxing's legitimacy and status as a serious sport, transforming it into showbiz rather than competition. And then you've got defenders who credit Jake for the psychological strength and bravery it requires to step up against a genuine threat from someone who could genuinely injure you. Whatever your individual opinion on which perspective is correct, the outcome confirmed the basic boxing reality that the professionals and traditional analysts kept emphasizing over and over again. Skill level, experience, and knockout power matter. Those core principles haven't shifted, and they won't shift regardless of how much money or marketing gets invested in these celebrity matchups. That wraps up today's breakdown. Really appreciate you watching and staying with me through this entire analysis. Keep watching, and I'll be back soon with more breakdown.